So, all right. So this week we get into competition. So we're going to be looking at how companies maximize profit. We're going to unlock the holy grail of business and decision making as we explore different environments that firms operate in. You know, if you think about Google as a company, or John Deere Tractor as a company, or Pizza Time as a company, they all operate in different environments. And so we're going to explore that, so hopefully you can become a sharper thinker on the type of environment you might be operating in. And so we're going to start off with a competitive environment. And this is kind of just a funny video. Does anybody remember or been exposed to I Love Lucy? It's an old show where there's a comedian, Lucille Ball, and she has got her friends here, and they're I think they're kind of fighting in the scene a little bit, as you'll see. But it's a short clip that kind of highlights some of the things about competition, and here they're making hamburgers. So this is just a short clip to get us started here.
Sounds pretty good.
Look, mister, 14 cents.
Wow. I like to save a penny when I can.
That's right now. We're going to pull you around. Mister, 13 cents. Look, mister, 10 cents. 10 cents. 5 cents. 4. 3, 2, 1. What's the hamburgers?
Are you losing your mind?
I want them to get him.
1 cent hamburgers. I like 100 hamburgers.
I'm sorry, we're all out of hamburgers.
Great leaders aren't born.
All right, so a little fun thing with competitive environment. So I want to start off by thinking about a spectrum of competition. So what is the kind of range of things that we'll look at? This really includes this chapter and the next chapter is what we're covering this week, chapters 21 and 22. So the spectrum of competition. So at one end of the spectrum, we kind of have a picture of perfect competition. What would a perfectly competitive environment look like? In reality, we don't have perfect competition in most circumstances. It can be pretty narrow, but it can be insightful on thinking about what a competitive environment can look like. So with perfect competition, the first thing we have is a large number of sellers. Large number of sellers. How large? Well, really large. So imagine if I take this bucket here, and I fill the bucket about halfway, right to here. And then I add 1 drop of water into the bucket. Imagine the bucket's transparent. So I have but this bucket's filled with here to water. I take an eyedropper and put 1 drop of water. Will you see the water level rise? No, that's how big. So large number of sellers every seller is just a drop of water in the bucket. In other words, they're relatively insignificant to the whole market. So each a drop of water in the bucket. Very small relative to the overall market supply. Their supply of the good is very small relative to the overall market supply. So we're going to have 3 of these characteristics. Number 2 is that we have a homogeneous good that they're selling. Homogeneous good. Basically identical goods. So identical goods, farming, agricultural products kind of fall nicely into this. One farmer's milk compared to another farmer's milk. One farmer's corn to another farmer's corn. One farmer's soybeans to another farmer's soybeans, right? So basically, each individual farmer has goods that are identical. They can't get an edge, a competitive edge, by differentiating their product. So identical goods, ag products work pretty good here. If you think about buying something on Amazon, is there often multiple sellers of the same good? Like if you go to buy pens or something. So literally, there could be multiple sellers of identical goods. We see that on Amazon online all the time, that there's multiple vendors selling the same product. So that would be another example where this homogeneous good kind of kicks in. So none of these large number of sellers, none of them have any edge in terms of the product that they're making. They're all homogeneous good. And then lastly, our third criteria here is free entry and exit. Free entry and exit into the market. So that means it's pretty easy to start up a business and to get out of business. So easy to start and get out of business. You see a profitable opportunity, you're like, oh, I'm going to sell that product, right? And you just jump right into the market. So fairly low cost maybe of getting in. So free entry and exit. So that's what we call perfect competition at this end of the spectrum. Any questions on any of those? At the other end of the spectrum, we have no competition. What do we call that? Common board game that you might have played. Monopoly. So one seller. So Monopoly is at the other end of the spectrum. So basically no competition, one seller. And so I guess I could have probably said one seller here. So number 1, instead of a large number of sellers, I'll just go ahead and repeat it. We have one seller. So we want to think about these characteristics of this one compared to that one. And that, by the way, is kind of unrealistic as well. So if we're going to spend more time on Monopoly and places where there's less competition in the next chapter, so I don't want to spend too much time on it now. But I do want to point out that the idea of a monopoly is actually not really true either, almost not as true as this perfectly competitive environment. If we think about industry where there's only one product, is there ever really something that doesn't have any substitutes whatsoever, right? Can you find another substitute product? So historically, maybe we'd talk about the oil companies or the telephone company. I think the telephone company is a good one that, is there other ways to communicate? And then what happens over time, new innovations in technology come up with cell phones and the telephone monopoly goes away, right? So there's always some amount of substitutability, even if it might be weak. Okay, so number 2 is the same as over here because there's only one seller. So number 2 is a homogeneous good. And so you can think of this being like a single product. And so that is what they have. So it's kind of by its nature homogeneous. And then the last one's kind of the key one. Instead of there being free entry and exit, we're going to have barriers to entry. Barriers to entry. So maybe we're a drug dealer, in downtown Kansas City, and so we have our territory. And if somebody else kind of comes up trying to deal cocaine in our area, we tend to send people out to break family members' legs. Would that tend to keep people from trying to sell cocaine in your territory? Yeah, right? So that is one type of barrier to entry, right? So that's an illegal market, of course, but that's a barrier to entry that might keep them going. And so the same thing is true. The government might create some barriers through patents and other things. There might be a really high cost of entry. So there's a number of things we'll cover again later in more detail. So I'll just kind of leave that one out there, that type of thing will keep there from being competition is the main point here. So how does a monopoly keep its power? Well, there's probably the barriers to entry are number one in terms of how do they make money and still maintain being the only show in town. There's some sort of barriers to entry. Okay, questions on that one though? All right, so the real world lives in the middle here somewhere. The real world lives in the middle. And so towards the left side of the spectrum, if this is over here somewhere over here, we have monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition. And that market is pretty competitive. The only thing we're going to do here from 1, 2, and 3 of perfect competition is we're going to allow sellers to have a differentiated product. So number 1 is the same, large number. I'm going to write kind of small here, but it's the same as here. So this one's the same. Number 2, a differentiated product. So if we go to buy shampoo or deodorant at Walmart, how many different brands of shampoo are going to be on the shelves that we're looking at? How many different brands of shampoo? Is there 20 up there? Could be that high maybe. I'm not sure sometimes it can be a little tricky on how they do it and which companies are doing them. But you might have 20 different types of shampoo to pick from. And are all the shampoo products different or differentiated? In other words, what do we mean by this differentiated? Are all of them going to kind of clean your hair? Kaylin, you want to add on?
They'll kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, they're basically the functionality is the same. They might have different fragrance or different style or something's a little bit different. But so they're not different products, but they're differentiated products. So very good substitutes with each other. So when we say differentiated, the competitors, let's just put many good substitutes. And then number 3 is free entry and exit. So we still have number 3 being the same. Free entry, exit. And then of course, the reason I call this a spectrum is that sometimes the products might be more closer together. We'd probably be sliding this way, right? If we start to have fewer and fewer sellers, maybe we're starting to drift this way. So somewhere in that area is this idea of monopolistic competition. Okay, and then the last one lives a little closer to monopoly, called oligopoly. Kind of a weird word that's kind of unique to economics. Oligopoly. And with oligopoly, the big distinction is that there's only going to be a few sellers. So as we're moving this way along the spectrum, a market where there's just a few sellers. How many cell phone companies do we have? Let's name them. AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Cricket, and Cricket's actually, though, a subsidiary of one of those other ones. So really those three big ones, now that Sprint merged with T-Mobile, we're really down to three, right? So we can kind of think about those provisions. Is there other, alternatives, the low-cost alternatives, the flat-rate ones? Those are usually the ones that are offshoots of the big ones. But certainly most of the market is with those three sellers. Okay, and there might be good reasons why they're there, and they still might be pretty competitive, right? So one thing to note is that it's possible to have a few sellers, but they're still pretty hungry for your money, right? And so they fight with each other to have a plan that's $40 a month, and one says, I can do it for $35 a month, right? And so just because there's a few sellers doesn't mean that we might not get still a competitive result depending on some other circumstances. All right, so number two, the few sellers, this can be homogeneous or differentiated in this market. We don't really care. So with cell phone service, it's slightly differentiated. In some respects, depending on how we define it, maybe it's close to identical, but it doesn't really matter anyway for this market structure. And then lastly, we do have some barriers to entry. Barriers to entry, just like we had with Monopoly. If you're a cell phone company, is it pretty cheap to start putting towers all over the United States? No, that has slowly evolved over time, right? So it would be pretty high cost for a new cell phone company to put up new towers everywhere, for instance. So that can create a barrier to entry. All right, so now we kind of have this idea of no competition, perfect competition, and then the real world. And by having these three characteristics identified, it helps us think through some of the different situations that they might be in. Okay, so most of chapter 21 that we're in is going to be kind of on this side, and then we'll kind of drift this way as we go into chapter 22 as we work through the week. All right, so the first thing we'll look at is a price taker versus a price searcher. So a price taker versus a price, I like to say maker because it rhymes, but maker, parentheses, searcher. Searcher. Your textbook calls it a price searcher. I like price maker just because it rhymes with taker, but I've seen it both ways. Okay, so a price taker is a firm that is in this category. Do they have much power to set the price of their product? Do they have much power to make their own price? No. They looking like, oh my gosh, there's 4 other sellers on Amazon that are selling my exact product. Maybe I can do it by a penny, but basically this good is going to be $4.95, right? I don't have any power. So I'm going to take the price that's given to me from the market, is the idea of the taking part. The price is set outside of my power because there's a whole bunch of sellers and anybody else can start selling this product and it's identical. It's like I'm kind of powerless in terms of pricing. So the idea of a price taker is that the firm, the business, has no market power because of the 3 characteristics that we just did. Three characteristics of, I guess I'll just put perfect competition. No market power, and it must take the price that's given to it. The firm takes the price that the market generates. So when we're thinking about the market here, we've got thousands of sellers, thousands of buyers on Amazon, and it's through their interaction of supply and demand that we get the price given to us. So the price searcher, the price maker, has some market power. So the firm has some market power due to differentiated product and or barriers to entry. So even as we went to the monopolistic competition here to the red, just having a differentiated product allowed a little bit of pricing power. So if we're McDonald's and we think about McDonald's, Burger King, and Hardee's, and whatever other fast food hamburger we might have in town, we might think, oh, McDonald's can charge whatever price they want for their Big Mac or whatever their signature sandwich is, right? And so they can charge whatever price they want. They can make their own price. Well, why not do $15? And the answer is because Burger King's right across the street. Nobody's going to pay $15. So even though they can make their own price, they're really subject to competition of across the street with Burger King and Hardee's in terms of how much wiggle room they have for the Big Mac. They can put on their secret sauce and do some other stuff, but they still only have a little bit of wiggle room to raise the price. Whereas our cocaine dealer, on the other hand, because of these strong barriers, might be able to charge a high price for their cocaine, keeping competitors out, right? If you want to buy cocaine in my neighborhood, then you're gonna have to pay. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, so yeah, this looks like a good spot. I want to make sure I have enough room. So here is the graph of perfect competition. So perfect competition model. So you're going to draw two graphs side by side. So give yourself enough room. Make sure you give yourself enough paper and make it nice and big. Don't cheap out on your paper for this one. This one's important. So to the left, we're going to draw the market. And let's draw the corn market here. So the market for corn, so one of our ag products. And so what we're doing is a home base from chapter 3. So there's a supply and a demand. So just draw any old kind of supply and demand curve on your paper. And with home base, the interaction of a large number of sellers and a large number of buyers ends up cranking out a price of $5 a bushel for our corn. And so there's like 100, and this is maybe measured in millions, right? So we got like 100 million bushels of corn that are being generated in the market, the corn market. Okay, so nothing new there. That's chapter 3, basically, that we've been working on and did the test on. All right, so then off to the right, by the way, for the test, I hope to get those back to you. We got some people that had to miss, so they'll be taking it late, and I guess I'd be shooting hopefully for Thursday, but this week for sure for getting results back to you on that. So off to the right, I'm going to put one of these drops of water. So I'm going to put one of the sellers and just call that seller the representative firm, or, you know, Farmer Joe. So over here is Farmer Joe. Farmer Joe is our representative firm, our representative drop of water. What does life look like for Farmer Joe? So Farmer Joe is a price taker. And so now we can think of, well, how much would Farmer Joe, we can create Farmer Joe's demand curve. What's the demand curve for Farmer Joe's corn in the market? Well, if Farmer Joe makes 10 bushels of corn, he's going to get $5. Well, what if Farmer Joe doubles production to 20 bushels? He's still a drop of water, and so he's going to get $5. What if Farmer Joe does 30 bushels? $5. $5, $5, $5, $5. Farmer Joe's demand curve is perfectly elastic or inelastic when it's perfectly flat? Elastic, very good. Good, sharp. You guys were quick on the draw on that one. So perfectly flat is perfectly elastic. And so it turned out that one of those extreme cases we're going to kind of get into now. All right, so that's the demand curve for Farmer Joe. And the next thing I want to look at is the revenue. So what is the profit equation? How does Farmer Joe calculate his profits for his company? How does Farmer Joe calculate profit? So what's the profit equation? Profit equals, good, total revenue minus total cost. All right. And what's the equation for total revenue? For a single product company, you're selling lemonade at the bottom of the driveway, lemonade stand, and you're selling lemonade for $1 a piece and you sell 50 of them. What's your total amount of sales revenue? What's the equation? Sales, quantity of sales? Is that it? What else? How much money do you got? $1 per glass lemonade. You sold 50 lemonades. You sold 50 glasses. How much money do you have in your hand as a little 5-year-old? $50. So what's the equation for total revenue? Product price times quantity. Quantity sold. Price times quantity. Okay, so then we learned in the average cost chapter that sometimes it's good to look at my average total cost of each glass of lemonade times the quantity. And then just to be complete, because we'll be doing this one a little bit, we can factor out the Q like we did last week. And if I look at the difference between the price of my product that I sold it for and the average cost per unit in total times the number of units, that's just another way to look at my profits. Price per unit, average total cost per unit. The difference between the two is profit per unit times the number of units. Okay, so what I want to look at next that we haven't done before is marginal revenue. So we've done a lot of marginal things. We said that marginal, looking at the margin is the art of economics. Marginal revenue, MR. So marginal revenue for Farmer Joe would be the additional amount of money in the cash register when he bumps up production. So marginal revenue is the additional revenue from an additional unit of production. So how much more money do I get if I sell and produce 20 more glasses compared to 10, right? So from a formula standpoint, it's going to look kind of similar to what we've done before. Marginal revenue is simply the change in total revenue from a change in production. Marginal revenue is the change in total revenue from the change in production. All right, so let's do this for Farmer Joe. Let's take it at 10 and 20. So from our example, what is the marginal revenue producing at, or I'm sorry, let me do the total revenue. Total revenue at 10 and total revenue at 20. For Farmer Joe, using our numbers here, what's my total revenue for Farmer Joe at a production level of 10? The way I've got this set up here. So 50, did I hear? So at a production level of 10, price times quantity. So I get 5 times 10 equals 50. And what's it at 20? 100. So I get 5, the price stays the same, times 20 equals 100. All right, so what is the marginal revenue over that production range? So marginal revenue is the additional revenue from an additional unit. So using this formula here, what is the marginal revenue? What is the incremental amount of revenue spread over those incremental production units? 5, good. So how did we get that? Let's start upstairs is what? 100 minus 50, right? So our revenue went up from 50 to 100. So the change in total revenue was equal to 100 minus 50. But the change in quantity was going from 20 to 10, or 10 to 20. So we added 10 units. So 100 minus 50 is $50 in the cash register. But in order to get that money in the cash register, if I think about it on a per unit basis, I had 10 units, which gives me 5. So let me hit this a little bit differently. Suppose I'm at 10 and I do 11. What's the marginal revenue of the 11th bushel of corn? What's the marginal revenue of the 11th bushel of corn? So I have 10, and now I'm wondering what's the 11th bushel. If I just squeeze out one more bushel, how much more money am I going to get? What's the marginal revenue of the 11th bushel? $5, right? Good, Augie. So if I go here from 10 to 11, it's 1 unit, right? From 10 to 11 is just 1. Well, what am I selling it for ends up being the answer to it, right? It's $5. What's the marginal revenue of the 22nd unit? $5. What's the 33rd unit? $5. $5, $5, $5, $5, right? So the marginal revenue here is equal to the demand curve. It's equal to the price. So if I think about the marginal revenue curve, what's the marginal revenue of the 10th unit? $5. The 11th unit, $5. The 22nd unit, $5. The 20th unit, $5. The first unit, $5. The revenue generated by each additional unit of production is equal to the market price. And so I get $5, $5, $5, $5. And so I'm kind of drawing it above it, but it's actually coinciding with it, right? The demand curve is also the marginal revenue curve in a firm that's operating in a perfectly competitive environment. So demand equals marginal revenue. There's not supposed to be any space here. It's not higher. Demand equals marginal revenue, which is also equal to the price. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, well, Farmer Joe cannot escape the law of diminishing marginal product. No company can. The law of diminishing returns said that as you add more and more russes to a production process with at least one fixed resource like the grill top, the productivity of additional russes eventually falls. You can keep hiring russes of that variable resource, but the amount of product that each additional Russ makes, the additional hamburgers, is going to fall, which makes those hamburgers more expensive. Same thing with farming, right? As I try to put more and more seed into a fixed plot of land, the additional amount of corn you're going to get diminishes from each additional seed. Why? They start to become so compressed together, right? You can't plant seeds that way. So with a fixed amount of land, there's an optimal amount of variable inputs like corn seed that you can put into the ground, otherwise it's going to diminish. So no company, whether you're Amazon or Google, Facebook, Netflix, nobody escapes the law of diminishing marginal product. That's why it's a law. All right, so the implication of that over here for Farmer Joe is that he's going to have a marginal cost curve that looks just like what we did in the previous chapter. So remember, it was J-shaped, so I'm just going to have it, bottom out here at 10 and then go up and intersect through 20. But it's just the normal J-shaped marginal cost curve that we explored last week. So the law of diminishing marginal product gives rise to the law of increasing cost, or the upward sloping marginal cost curve. Those additional hamburgers got expensive. Same thing with the additional corn, the additional bushels of corn. One thing that I forgot to do, I got a little sloppy here on my representative firm. Make this little q. Little q for Farmer Joe's drop of water production, just to make it distinct from big Q, which is the market quantity. We'll get back to that element here in a little bit too, but just think of them being part of the production process, a drop of water in the bucket. Okay, so now it's Holy Grail time. The part every company, every CEO wants to know, you guys are going to learn in college so that you can bring it back to your company you work for and hopefully employ it as much as you can to keep you employed. How does a firm maximize profit? How does a firm maximize profit? The Holy Grail of business, that question. Russ likes to refer to as the Holy Grail of business. So let's go back to Farmer Joe here. And what quantity do you think Farmer Joe should produce? You know, less than 10, 10, somewhere between 10 and 20, 20, greater than 20, greater than 30. What quantity would maximize profit for Farmer Joe? 20. I'm hearing 20. Now 20 is where the two lines cross. It seems like it's always where the two lines cross that all the action happens in economics. But 10 looks kind of appealing to me. How many people are thinking 10 here? This is cost, this is revenue, marginal cost. We've got a nice big gap there. We're looking to make as much money as possible. How many people like that? Sam? You like it? You're just saying you like it? Yeah, 10 looks kind of appealing. How many other people are feeling 10? We had a couple 20s. You're liking 10, Tyler? So 10 definitely maximizes the distance between marginal revenue and marginal cost. Doesn't everybody agree with that? This is the marginal revenue. There's the marginal cost. That distance is maximized but does it maximize profit? So I'd like to hear some of you guys who say 20 talk me off of 10, because 10 looks really good to me. Augie.
That 10 you're only making $2.50 bushel versus $5 for the 20.
Okay, so you're adding in a little bit of number. So at where you're making what?
At 10 you're only making $2.50 a bushel if we're going off that same.
And how'd you get the $2.50? You're doing the distance here, like
Right.
estimating?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'll take your number here. So at 10, the cost of the 10th, using Augie's numbers, even though it's not quite drawn to scale here, let's just say that's $2.50.
Versus that $5 you're getting at 20 for only 10 more.
Versus at 20, you're doing what?
You're only making 10 more bushels, but you're getting $5.
You're getting $5, but you're getting $5 on 10 too, right? So if you do the 20th, you're not making anything, are you?
That's not. I was looking at the other graph. I was going off that J shape, not the left
Okay.
line.
No, that's fine. Anybody else? Yeah.
Wouldn't you maximize your profit by lowering the cost?
Well, you'd like to, but right now we're assuming that this is the best you can do, that there's not changes to be made. So when we look at this, we're like, that's our cost structure now. You know, maybe there's changes in the future, but right now, today, if that's our cost structure, what would be the best quantity? The only thing we can choose is quantity. All right, well, let's come back here to number 10. And as Augie pointed out, using these numbers here, we're making $2.50. But what if we did 11? Talk to me about the 11th unit and whether that's a good one to make or not. How much revenue, how much money in the cash register does the 11th one bring in? $5. And it costs me, though, here's the thing that's a little troubling maybe, is that this one cost me $2.70. So my cost of the 11th unit went up compared to the 10th. So how much am I going to get in the cash register for the 11th unit? $5. But then what does it cost me? $2.70. Should I make the 11th one? Is the 11th unit profitable? How much money did it put in the cash register? $5. How much did it cost me? $2.70. So I'm still making, what, $2.30. Is $2.30 a good thing for my profits? If I had my pile of profits sitting here, after making the 11th, I'm going to make that pile a little bigger. Is that a good thing? Yeah. Should I make the 12th? Yeah. Should I make the 13th? So with each one, what we're doing is we're analyzing at the margin the additional cost and the additional revenue. And where should we stop? Augie? 19 or 20. We'll get into that in a little bit here too. So Augie was right, at least his gut feeling was in getting there, but we had to kind of work through the logic. So I'm going to make the 13th, the 14th, 15th, 16th, all the way up. Should I make the 19th? Yes. Should I make the 20th? Should I make the 20th? Since this is economics class, what did we learn about economic profit versus accounting profit? Kaylin?
Economic includes implicit costs also.
Okay, good. So should we make that extra unit where the cost of the 20th unit is equal to $5 and the revenue is equal to $5? Is it okay to earn zero profit, zero economic profit? Yeah, it is. So we said that the company's actually earning a normal profit when economic profit is zero, right? So it's okay to earn a zero economic profit on that last one. You're still actually making money. You're covering all your opportunity costs, both implicit and explicit, by producing the 20th. So it's okay to do the 20th. Should I make the 21st? No, because now the cost of the 21st is $5.30, and the revenue generated by it is $5. I'm losing money on the 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd. And so we just figured out how to maximize profits. The holy grail of business is to produce 20. Let's call it Q star, which is our equilibrium quantity that we should produce. So the holy grail of business, how does a company maximize profits? It does so. How does a company maximize profits? By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of that last unit. How does a firm maximize profits? By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit, which is the marginal revenue, is just equal to the marginal cost of the last unit. So if I was doing shorthand notation, I would say something like this. Produce Q where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Nice, short, and sweet. But I want you to memorize the words up here. One of the worst things that you can do as you're trying to learn economics and the economic way of thinking is to say MR to yourself and MC. So we do this because it would take me double time to lecture if I had to write out every word. So instead of saying MR in your mind, you should be saying marginal revenue. And this is marginal cost. And this is a quantity. So produce the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit is just equal to the cost of the last unit. Marginal revenue and marginal cost. All right. So now that we got the Holy Grail figured out, and we know how to help a company maximize profits, how much profit are they actually making? What is the level of profits? How much profit is the company making? So that kind of brings us back to the level of profits with the profit equation. What's the profit equation again? To calculate the total amount of profits? Good. So recall profits equal total revenue minus total costs. So how would you show that here? You might want to take a stab.
What if you do 19 times the 270 and then
19 times the 270. So the 270, the problem with that is that the 270 is fixed for the 11th unit. The 10th unit was actually $2.50. The 13th unit was something higher yet. So each one of them actually had a different cost. But Justice, thank you, and extra credit. What's your last name again, Justice? Rodriguez. I gotcha.
Can you work with a fixed value?
You like add the difference between every, and then go from there.
Okay, so Colton is saying add the difference. So if we think about it this way, the profit, as we went through with Augie on the first one, the 10th unit had kind of this vertical height, right? The price was 5, the cost was $2.50, so I made $2.50 on the 10th unit. The 11th unit, I made $2.30. So I could start filling this in, but I don't want to do that because it'd be the wrong answer. So Colton, nice try. That's actually probably the best, closest thing you could do. What's your last name again? Taylor. All right, so good job. That's probably the closest we could come, but it turns out it's not possible. It's not possible given the information that we have up here. So I'm gonna throw the towel in, let you guys know it's not possible to show it. So I want you to think, what's missing? What's missing up here that would help fill us in? Sam?
I don't know, there's nothing wrong with it. We still don't, we kind of don't even know the total cost yet for it.
That's right, we don't. So what curve would be nice to have up here? What information would allow us to calculate total profit? You basically said it, Sam.
Your margin.
We got the marginal cost, total cost, specifically average total cost, yes. So now, if we got this equation down, profits need, I'm going to shortcut down to what we did before, price minus average total cost times quantity. If we had price and average total cost, that's how you calculate profit. So we don't have that over here. Let me push you a little bit further on that. What is marginal cost? Because you're kind of dangerously close, right? So the first unit, if we were, drawing this all the way over here, you could fill in this gap, but it turns out that is missing something. Does anybody see what it's missing? This is what you really need, because that analysis would be missing something. Okay, you're getting real close. We're missing average variable cost, but is variable cost included in marginal cost?
Fixed cost.
Fixed cost is the one we're actually missing. So if we had average total and average variable, we could calculate it. But the point is that we're missing the fixed cost analysis of this. So let me put another note to hopefully gel this back together. That last chapter we did last week, by the way, is real important, because that's going to come and be put to use here. So marginal cost was equal to the change in total cost over the change in quantity, which was also equal to the change in total variable cost over the change in quantity. In other words, when we look at the extra cost of another unit, should we include the rent in with that? Did we actually spend more on rent when I bumped up my hamburgers? No, right? So the rent doesn't belong in there. The insurance doesn't belong in there. All of those fixed costs are not reflected in this marginal cost curve. So where you'd go wrong is if you added up all these green bars, you'd actually add up the total variable costs. So your profit would be just including the variable cost, I should say. You'd be missing out on the fixed costs. So you would be getting some kind of a profit equation, but you'd be missing out on fixed costs. All right, so let's draw one on there. So let's take average total cost curve. Remember, it has to be bowl-shaped and it bottoms out. Average total cost. Let's put it somewhere up here. I like to put the big fat dot. Remember, the marginal cost curve cuts through the average total cost curve at its minimum point. Now, how would you calculate how much money this profit maximizing firm is making? What would be the mechanics of it? How much am I going to make? What's the profit maximizing quantity? How much am I going to make? I'm Farmer Joe. What quantity maximizes profit?
19.
Nope, not 19. You were supposed to learn that lesson like 10 minutes ago.
10.
What is the quantity we're making? 20. Remember, okay, we didn't want to stop at 19. You're okay. This is the time to get that. So let me make sure I get Augie down here in that extra credit book. So remember, you're still earning a normal profit on that last thing. Evan, what's your last name again? Johnson. Make sure we're getting everybody. Okay, so we're going to make 20. So the profit maximizing quantity is 20. How do I calculate profits now that I have the average total cost curve up there? And I just want to make sure you guys are learning how to use the graph appropriately. Like, I want to know what the mechanics are. So I think you've got this part down here. What's the price? 5. All right, so let's start there. So for Farmer Joe profit equals 5 minus my average total cost. And then how many am I producing? 20. So we know that Farmer Joe is going to be making 20 times 5 is $100 worth of revenue, money in the cash register. So now how do I calculate the average total cost? Using it, how would you do it graphically over here, given where I've placed the average total cost curve? Who wants to come up and show me how to do it graphically? How would you do it at 20? Evan, give me a number between 5 and 13.
7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hey, what's your name? Jackson, come on up. All right, Jackson. So here's your marker. So we're over here, and we're making 20 units, right? 20 units. And all I'm trying to figure out is, if you were given this graph on a homework or test or whatever, what is the average total cost, because I'm trying to plug in this number, what is the average total cost of making 20 units? How would you do it graphically? The average total cost of making 20 units. So let me go back to a demand curve. I want to make sure that we're. So there's price, there's quantity, there's beer. We're back to beer. How much is the consumer willing to pay for 20 cases of beer? So Jackson, how would you do that to determine the price? All I'm trying to look at is the relation. The law of demand says as the price of beer goes up, the quantity of beer that people want to buy goes down, ceteris paribus. That was one of your test questions, remember, right? So law of demand. So what is the price at 20? How would you do it? Go ahead and use this graph. Okay. Tell me, how did you get the 5? Using this, are you going up here and then hanging left, and that's 5? That's what I want you to do. So remember, when we did this, I want you to be a little bit more precise. When you have a graph, you're going up to the curve that gives you the information about pricing, right? Hang a left, and because it's a demand curve, this is the price. Let's call it $8. The price that people are willing to pay for the 20th case of beer or whatever is $8. That's how we use these curves, right? That's what we've been doing since chapter 3 when we first brought the curves in. So now back to here, I want to know what's the average total cost of making 20 units. Do the same thing for me. Starting here at 20 units, tell me what the average total cost per unit is. So there's the average total cost curve. I want you to think just like you did here. No? Start with the 20. Go ahead, put your marker there. Start heading north. Keep going, keep going. Stop when you get to the average total cost curve. hang a left, and that's the number, right? Okay, grab a seat, Jackson. Thanks for coming up. What's your last name, Jackson? Huh?
Frank, that's where I can get.
All right, so Jackson got it with a little help. The reason I wanted to make sure we have all that is that this is what we're doing every single time, you guys. You got to get comfortable. At 20 units, what's the average total cost per unit? I go up to the average total cost curve, hang a left, read off that number, and that number, according to my numbers here, looks like a 9. Just eyeballing, right? So let's just say it's a 9. And so now what's my profits? We got to put a 9 in there. So what's my profits? Negative 80. Nice holy grail, McCullough. We're losing our ass. We're losing money. 20 was stupid. So let's just challenge ourselves on that. If I produce 21 units, I change from 20, I'm losing 80 right now. If I make 21, is that a good move? No. I'm going to lose more than 80. If I produce less, I'm at 10 or 11 or somewhere in between, I would be losing more money. How could I make some money or make my loss less? Move this way. Why? Because the revenue generated by the 19th unit is still higher than the cost of the 19th unit. So you're still working to the good by moving to 20. So 20 is the profit maximizing or loss minimizing quantity. If you're losing money, you'll lose the least amount of money possible, right? So it's not just about making buco bucks. It might be, unfortunately, in some cases, losing the least amount of money possible. The great thing is the Holy Grail remains. You're going to be doing as best as you can. You're either going to be losing the least amount of money possible or making the most amount of money possible by following this rule. All right, so graphically, let's complete this now. You guys go ahead and if yours is a 9 or if it's something else, it doesn't really matter too much. Graphically, we're going to show the amount of economic profit, or in this case, it's economic loss. So kind of watch what I'm doing now with thinking about this equation. Price is 5, average cost is 9, so this vertical height here is the average profit per unit, which is kind of, I think, a little bit where Justice was going. I felt like that's the direction you were heading, is like, well, that would be the average per unit, because now we're doing that. When we're averaging it, we're going to multiply it times the 20. So this little rectangle here ends up being the amount of economic loss. Economic loss equal to negative 80, or it's a loss of 80 if we think of it as a positive. Or economic profit, if we think of it as a positive, economic profit of negative 80. So sometimes we might go either way on that. If we calculated a profit, it's a negative 80, or we can think of it as a loss of 80. All right. Questions on that? The farmer's doing good or not so good? What's the signal? Stop. You suck. You suck. You suck. What should I do? Go do your opportunity cost. Exit. 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 So when we have, especially if all the farmers are losing money, if we think of Farmer Joe not just being one farmer, but Farmer Joe is representative of all the drops of water. And if year after year, month after month, they're losing money in this and they exit, what happens to the price of corn? It's going to go up. What happens back over here? Now we're going to kind of come back to this. When there is the number of suppliers falls, one of our supply shifters, what happens here? Demand or supply when the number of suppliers exit?
Demand.
Is it demand?
Supply.
It's supply. So it's one of our supply shifters was the number of suppliers. And so some of those farmers are going to exit. Maybe instead of doing corn, they're going to shift into soybeans or something, right? So there's going to be some sort of adjustment, and the supply of corn is going to shift to the left. What happens to price? It starts to go up, which makes the loss go down for the farmers that remain. So now what's happening is as this goes up, the demand for Farmer Joe's is going up, and so the loss is shrinking. When will it stop? When will farmers quit exiting? When they start making money? Never. When there's no loss. When the loss is gone. So if price got up high enough, close to $9 now, and one thing to notice here, I'm gonna do this with a different graph later, but as this price goes up, this is going up. What's happening to the quantity that is the profitable quantity when price is at the golf club level here? What's happening to Farmer Joe's production level? Does it stay at 20? It's going up, right? So now the marginal cost curve, assuming that stayed the same, the new marginal revenue is right here. So now the Farmer Joe maximizes profits by producing maybe 22 units. But they're still losing money, and so their price is going to continue to rise until we get right there. At this level, we have no economic profit, right? Profit is back to normal. Economic profits of 0 is okay in econ class because we include all of the implicit and explicit cost in the calculation of cost. Okay, so let's write some of that out. Questions or comments? This is some powerful stuff. All right, so note. Let's see, I wanted to start with the loss thing. So, Holy Grail also works to minimize losses, to minimize economic losses. Farmer is losing the least amount possible at the quantity of 20 as we drew it out. Okay, so what happens in the long run? So last time on Friday we talked about the distinction between the long run and the short run. So the long run was a period of time in which you can change anything, right? You can get a new building, you can get a new tractor, you can change any of your inputs. So what happens in the long run here? Well, if the farmer continues to lose money, then there's going to be exit. So economic profit less than 0 signals exit. Number 2, as firms exit, that means there's a decrease in supply and an increase in the market equilibrium price, which makes the losses smaller.
I have a question. Isn't the price equivalency like the demand kind of?
So the price is coming from the big market, and you're right, there's a demand curve here, but when we had the supply change due to exit, the price was going up, the quantity demanded was changing. So the demand wasn't shifting, I guess. But it is the interaction of supply and demand that's giving the market price. Okay, so which makes the losses smaller. So number 3 is that exit continues until economic profit equals 0. And that ends up being a long run equilibrium. So one of our predictions that's important in a competitive setting is that we don't think companies are going to be earning abnormally huge profits. Why? Free entry and exit. If they're making an obnoxious amount of profits, companies are going to enter, and that entry is going to squeeze them down to 0. Same thing if companies are losing their tails, then there's going to be exit back to normal as well. All right, we'll wrap up there and see you tomorrow.